The night Respect walked out, and Destiny sat down. Christmas Eve. The restaurant glittered like a postcard. Crystal glasses caught the golden light. Laughter spilled across white linen tables. Couples leaned close over candle flames, whispering promises about the new year. At table 17, Logan Hayes sat stiff in his chair, still wearing his work jacket. There was engine grease under his fingernails. He had come straight from the garage. He didn't have time to go home and change. Across from him, his blind date, Andrea, tilted her head slightly as if studying something unpleasant. "You didn't think to clean up?" she asked, loud enough for the couple beside them to hear. Logan forced a polite smile. "I worked late. Holidays get busy." Andrea's eyes traveled from his worn boots to the faded name patch stitched onto his jacket. "Mechanic." Her lips curved, not into a smile but into a verdict. I expected something different." Logan nodded slowly. He'd heard that before. Then she pushed her chair back. "You're not really my type," she said. She didn't whisper. She didn't hesitate. She grabbed her purse and walked out. Just like that. Forks paused midair. A few heads turned. A waiter froze, pretending not to stare. Logan remained seated for 3 long seconds. He wasn't angry. He was tired. Tired of the look. The quick calculation. The silent downgrade. He reached for his jacket to leave. Then a voice came from the table beside him. "Calm. Clear. Controlled. Can you be my husband?" The restaurant noise didn't stop, but it felt like it did. Logan turned slowly. At the neighboring table sat a woman in a black dress so simple it screamed wealth. Dark hair pulled back. Diamond studs no larger than raindrops. Her posture was straight. Her expression unreadable. She wasn't smiling. She wasn't teasing. She was serious. "Excuse me?" Logan said. She held his gaze. "I asked if you can be my husband." Nearby someone coughed. A glass clinked too loudly. Logan half laughed. "I think you might have me confused with someone else." "No," she said evenly. "I don't." She gestured to the empty chair across from her. "Sit. Let me explain before you assume I've lost my mind." There was no mockery in her voice. No pity either. Only certainty. And something else. Recognition. Logan hesitated. His pride was already bruised tonight. But something in the woman's eyes stopped him from walking away. He sat. "My name is Eleanor Price," she said. "I'm the CEO of Price Global Holdings." Logan blinked once. The name hit somewhere in his memory. Financial news. Tech acquisitions. Billions in assets. She didn't say it to impress him. She said it like someone stating their blood type before surgery. Relevant. Necessary. "I need a husband," she continued. "Legally. Publicly. Strategically." Logan leaned back slowly. "You're proposing to a mechanic you met 30 seconds ago?" "Yes." He waited for a punchline. None came. "My family has a clause in our corporate trust," she said calmly. "If I am unmarried by my 35th birthday, my controlling shares revert to my uncle." "And when's your birthday?" 4 months. The pieces started forming. "And you need someone who won't try to control you," Logan said. Her eyes sharpened slightly. "Exactly." She studied his hands. "The woman who left you saw grease. I saw proof you build things. Fix things. Maintain things. You didn't chase her when she walked out. That matters." Logan gave a short breath of disbelief. "You don't know anything about me." "I know you weren't ashamed," Eleanor said. "You were disappointed. There's a difference." Silence stretched between them. Logan finally asked, "What do I get out of this?" "Stability," she answered immediately. "A legally structured agreement. You keep your job. Your independence. No interference. 2 years of public appearances. Then we divorce quietly." She paused. "And no one will ever treat you like you're invisible again." That last sentence hit harder than the rest. Logan swallowed. "I have a son," he said firmly. "He's 7. His name is Caleb. He doesn't get confused. He doesn't get hurt. If this affects him, I walk. No debate." For the first time, her expression softened. "I respect that," she said quietly. He watched her carefully. Not a flicker of manipulation. Not a hint of superiority. Just calm negotiation. "Why me?" he asked finally. She leaned forward slightly. "Because men from my world see me as leverage. You don't." He let that sink in. Outside, snow began to fall lightly against the window. Logan thought about Caleb. About overdue bills. About how many times he'd been dismissed before anyone bothered to know him. He didn't say yes. He didn't say no. He stood. "I'll meet you again," he said. "Daytime. Public place. And I'll ask questions you won't enjoy." A small smile touched the corner of her mouth. "I would expect nothing less." She slid a simple white business card across the table. No logo. Just her name and a number. Logan placed it inside his jacket pocket, the same one that still held his rejected dinner receipt. 2 weeks later, after 3 meetings, background checks, legal reviews, and one quiet afternoon watching how Eleanor spoke to Caleb without trying to win him over, Logan agreed. Not because she was rich. Not because he needed saving. But because she treated him like an equal before he had anything to offer her. The courthouse wedding took 11 minutes. No flowers. No guests. Just signatures. And when they stepped outside into the winter air, Eleanor turned to him and asked, "Coffee?" He nodded. It felt strangely normal. But the real storm hadn't begun yet. Because in 3 days, he would meet her family. And they had already decided he didn't belong. The dinner where they tried to break him. The estate didn't look like a house. It looked like power carved into stone. Logan slowed his old pickup truck as the iron gates opened automatically. The tires crunched against the driveway so long it felt intentional, like it was giving him time to reconsider turning around. The mansion stood at the end like a monument to old money. Tall columns. Perfect symmetry. Windows glowing with warm golden light that felt less welcoming and more evaluating. Beside him in the passenger seat, Eleanor sat calm, composed, unreadable. "You don't have to prove anything tonight," she said quietly. "I'm not here to prove," Logan replied. "I'm here to stand." She nodded once. Inside, the air smelled like polished wood and expensive perfume. A butler took their coats. Logan noticed how the man's eyes paused for half a second on his calloused hands before masking the judgment behind professional neutrality. Then Eleanor's mother appeared. Margaret Price. Silver hair styled perfectly. Pearl necklace. Smile sharp enough to cut glass. She didn't look at Logan first. She looked at Eleanor. "So," she said smoothly, "this is the surprise." Eleanor didn't flinch. "This is my husband. Logan Hayes." Only then did Margaret's eyes move toward him. It wasn't a glare. It was assessment. Like inspecting an object that had arrived damaged. "So you're the mechanic?" Margaret said. Logan extended his hand. "Yes, ma'am." She shook it briefly, barely. "Interesting choice," she murmured. They were led into the dining room. 7 seats at the long polished table. Crystal glasses already filled. Silverware aligned perfectly. Eleanor's uncle, Richard, sat at the head. The man who would inherit her shares if she remained unmarried. He smiled when he saw Logan. But his eyes didn't. "Well," Richard said, folding his napkin, "this should be enlightening." Dinner began politely enough. Weather. Markets. Charity boards. Then it shifted. Richard leaned back in his chair and addressed Logan directly. "So Logan, tell me, how does one transition from oil changes to the upper tier of society?" A few quiet chuckles circled the table. Logan kept his tone even. "I didn't transition anywhere. I married my wife." Richard smiled wider. "And what exactly do you bring to this marriage?" The question wasn't curiosity. It was accusation. Before Eleanor could speak, Logan answered. "I bring loyalty. I bring stability. And I bring someone who doesn't want anything from her except honesty." The room stilled slightly. Margaret dabbed her napkin at her lips. "Ambition is usually a trait we value," she said softly. "I'm ambitious," Logan replied. "Just not greedy." Richard leaned forward. "Surely you understand how this looks." "I do," Logan said calmly. "It looks like you underestimated your niece." That landed. A fork paused midair. Richard's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Margaret's tone cooled. "Our concern," she said, "is that this marriage feels strategic." Eleanor finally spoke. "It is strategic. For me." Silence. Logan didn't interrupt. He didn't defend. He didn't apologize. And that seemed to irritate them more than anything. The conversation grew sharper. Richard began asking about Logan's income, his education, his background. Each question framed like harmless curiosity, but aimed like a blade. Logan answered every one without shame. "Yes, I grew up in a trailer park. Yes, I worked since I was 16. Yes, I have a GED. No, I don't own stocks." Richard gave a theatrical sigh. "It must be quite overwhelming," he said, "marrying into this level of wealth." Logan met his eyes. "No more overwhelming than rebuilding a transmission from scratch." A faint smirk appeared on one cousin's face. Margaret's fingers tightened around her wine glass. You'll forgive us, she said, if we question motives? We've seen this before. Logan tilted his head slightly. Have you? Richard leaned back again. Men who see opportunity. Logan nodded slowly. You think I married her for money? We think you saw advantage. Logan let a beat pass. If I wanted advantage, he said evenly, I'd have worn a better suit and lied about who I was. The table went quiet. Because that was the thing. He hadn't lied. He hadn't pretended. He hadn't tried to impress anyone. He simply existed. And that unsettled them. Then Richard made his mistake. He turned to Eleanor. You always did enjoy rescuing strays. The insult hung in the air. Logan didn't react. But Eleanor did. She placed her fork down. Slowly. Say that again, she said quietly. Richard waved a dismissive hand. Oh, come now. Say. Again. The temperature in the room dropped. Margaret intervened. That's enough. But the damage was done. Logan finally spoke. I'm not a stray, he said calmly. And she didn't rescue me. He stood. Not in anger. In clarity. You think I'm beneath this table because my hands are dirty at the end of the day. But every dollar you invest, every company you acquire, every car parked outside this house, someone like me keeps them running. He looked at Richard. You inherit power. He looked at Margaret. I build value. Then he turned to Eleanor. I don't need their approval. He addressed the room one last time. And I don't need your money. He picked up his jacket. The butler stepped forward, uncertain. Eleanor rose with him. Dinner's over, she said firmly. Margaret's voice sharpened. If you walk out now. Eleanor faced her mother fully. If we walk out now, you'll know exactly who miscalculated. She took Logan's hand. And for the first time since the evening began, the power shifted. They left together. Outside, cold air hit Logan's face like clarity. He expected Eleanor to be angry, embarrassed. Instead, she laughed softly. Thank you, she said. For what? For not shrinking. He looked at her. I won't shrink. Not for anyone. She studied him carefully. They're going to try something, she said. What kind of something? The kind that doesn't happen at the dinner table. Inside the mansion, Richard was already speaking in hushed tones with Margaret. Because humiliation hadn't worked. And when power can't control through shame, it moves to strategy. And they had 4 months to break this marriage. 3 days later, Logan arrived at his garage to find something strange. 2 men in suits standing near his truck. Waiting. And that's when he realized. Dinner had only been the opening move. When power strikes back. The 2 men didn't belong in a mechanic's garage. That was the first thing Logan noticed. They stood too straight. Shoes too polished. Jackets too expensive for a place that smelled like diesel and hot metal. Logan wiped his hands on a rag and walked toward them. Can I help you? One of them offered a tight, corporate smile. Mr. Hayes? That's me. We represent a private financial interest connected to the Price family. Of course you do, Logan thought. The second man stepped forward. We'd like to have a conversation. Privately. Logan glanced back inside the garage. Mike was under a lifted truck. The air compressor roared in the background. Say it here, Logan replied. The first man adjusted his cuff. Our client believes your recent marriage may not be sustainable. Logan crossed his arms. And? The second man pulled a slim folder from his briefcase. Inside was a check. Not filled in. Blank. We're authorized to offer compensation, the man said smoothly. For a clean annulment. Quiet. Efficient. There it was. The assumption. The insult. The price tag. Logan stared at the check for a long moment. Then he laughed. Not loudly. Just enough. You think I married her for this? It's simply business, the man replied. Logan looked at the blank line where numbers could go. Fill it in, he said calmly. The men exchanged a glance. How much would satisfy you? Logan leaned closer. Write 10 million. They blinked. Then the first man nodded slightly and uncapped his pen. Logan watched him begin to write. And then, Logan reached out, took the check from his hand, and tore it clean in half. The paper ripped loud enough to echo off the garage walls. He dropped the pieces at their feet. Here's your answer. The second man's expression hardened. You're making a mistake. Logan met his eyes steadily. No, he said. You are. They left without another word. But Logan knew. That wasn't the end. That was escalation. That evening, Eleanor stood in Logan's small kitchen while Caleb did homework at the table. They approached you, she said quietly. Yes. How much? Doesn't matter. She studied him. You turned it down? Of course I did. Her composure cracked just slightly. You need to understand something, she said. My uncle doesn't lose gracefully. Logan leaned against the counter. I'm not afraid of him. You should be, she replied softly. 2 days later, the first punch landed. Logan arrived at work to find the garage owner, Mr. Braddock, waiting for him. Arms crossed. Face tense. We need to talk. Inside the small office, the air felt heavy. Logan, corporate pulled our commercial contract. What contract? The fleet maintenance deal with Allied Logistics. Logan frowned. That's half our monthly revenue. Braddock nodded grimly. They said they're going in a different direction. Logan understood immediately. Allied Logistics was a subsidiary of Price Global Holdings. Richard had just cut oxygen to the garage. Are you firing me? Logan asked calmly. Braddock shook his head. No. But if we don't replace that contract soon. The sentence didn't need finishing. Logan walked back to his station slowly. Mike approached him. What's going on? Politics, Logan replied. Mike squinted. What kind of politics messes with brake pads and oil filters? The rich kind, Logan thought. That night, Eleanor sat across from him at his apartment table. They touched your work. Yes. Her jaw tightened. They want to pressure you financially. Make this arrangement uncomfortable. Logan nodded once. Then we get comfortable being uncomfortable. She looked at him for a long time. Why are you still here? She asked quietly. Because I don't quit when things get hard. That's not what I meant. He understood what she was really asking. Why not take the money? Why not walk away before it damages your life? Logan leaned forward. You married me because I wasn't impressed by your world. Yes. Well, he said gently, I'm also not intimidated by it. Something shifted in her eyes then. Respect deepened into something warmer. Something less strategic. But Richard wasn't done. 3 days later, an article hit. Headline. Billionaire heiress marries small-town mechanic, strategic love or desperate move? The piece was subtle. Poison disguised as curiosity. It questioned Logan's background. Dug into his past. Mentioned his GED. Mentioned his income. Used phrases like social disparity and power imbalance. It didn't accuse him outright. It planted doubt. Social media followed. Comments. Speculation. Memes. Caleb came home from school quiet that afternoon. Dad? He asked carefully. Yes, buddy? Are we famous? Logan knelt down. Not really. Kid said you married a rich lady for money. The words hit harder than Richard's check. Logan kept his voice steady. Do you think I would do that? Caleb shook his head. No. Then that's what matters. But inside, Logan felt something crack. Not pride. Protection. They weren't just targeting him. They were targeting his son. That night he drove alone. No destination. Just thinking. He pulled into a quiet overlook above the city and stared at the lights below. This wasn't about wealth anymore. This was about dignity. And Richard thought dignity had a price. He was wrong. Meanwhile, Eleanor sat in her office high above the skyline. Richard entered without knocking. You're embarrassing yourself, he said flatly. She didn't look up from her tablet. You're attacking my husband. He's a liability. He's a man. Richard scoffed. He's a mechanic. She finally looked up. And you're threatened by one. Silence. Richard's eyes narrowed. You think this is romantic? He asked quietly. You think this is strength? No, she said calmly. This is principle. He leaned closer. I will not let a garage worker destabilize this empire. Eleanor stood slowly. He's not destabilizing it, she said. You are. For the first time. Richard looked uncertain. Because pressure wasn't breaking Logan. And Eleanor wasn't folding. Which meant, the next move would have to be dirtier. 2 nights later, Logan's truck brakes failed. Not completely. Just enough. Enough to nearly send him through an intersection. Enough to make his heart pound in his throat. He managed to stop. Barely. And when he crawled under the truck to inspect, he found the brake line cleanly sliced. Not worn. Not damaged. Cut. That's when it stopped being business. And started being war. Logan didn't tell Caleb. He didn't panic. He didn't rage. He did something worse. He documented it. Took pictures. Kept evidence. And the next morning, he walked into Eleanor's office tower unannounced. The receptionist tried to stop him. But Eleanor saw him through the glass. And when she saw his face, she knew. Something had changed. He placed the photos on her desk. They kept my breaks. The room went silent. Her hands slowly curled into fists. They touched your life, she whispered. Yes. She looked up at him. And for the first time since this arrangement began, there was no strategy in her eyes. Only fury. Richard thought intimidation would win. He had no idea what he just triggered. Because Logan Hayes didn't come from wealth. He came from survival. And survival doesn't scare easily. The man they tried to crush starts standing taller. Eleanor didn't scream. She didn't slam her fists on the desk. She didn't cry. She went quiet. And when powerful people go quiet, that's when things get dangerous. They cut your breaks, she repeated, staring at the photos on her desk. Logan stood across from her, calm but steady. Clean slice. Not wear. Not accident. Her eyes hardened. That's attempted murder. Or intimidation, Logan replied. She looked up sharply. Don't minimize it. I'm not, he said evenly. I'm clarifying it. Silence stretched between them. Then she reached for her phone. No, Logan said firmly. She froze. No what? No emotional moves. No retaliation from anger. She studied him. They endangered your life. And if we react without proof, he said calmly, they win. That was the difference between them. Eleanor was born into power. Logan was forged in pressure. He understood something she didn't. When someone tries to scare you, they're hoping you panic. And Logan didn't panic. That afternoon he took his truck to a trusted independent mechanic 2 towns over. Not someone connected to Price Global. Not someone who could be leaned on. The mechanic confirmed it. Brake line severed with a blade. Deliberate. Logan didn't accuse. He documented. Photos. Time stamps. A written inspection report. He made copies. 3 sets. Then he went back to work. Like nothing happened. And that unsettled people more than fear ever would. Meanwhile, Eleanor requested a private board review meeting. Not emotional. Not public. Strategic. She sat at the long glass conference table while executives dialed in from 3 continents. Richard joined 5 minutes late. On purpose. She didn't acknowledge it. I've initiated a forensic audit, she said calmly. The word forensic made 2 board members shift in their seats. Richard's jaw tightened. For what? He asked casually. For vendor interference, she replied. And potential abuse of corporate leverage. The air thickened. You're making bold accusations, Richard said. No, she corrected gently. I'm preventing them. She tapped her tablet and projected a slide. Allied logistics. The contract cancellation. The timing. The connection. And then, without mentioning Logan, she mentioned a pattern. Any executive found weaponizing corporate relationships for personal matters will face immediate removal, she said evenly. Richard held her gaze. She didn't blink. He realized something then. She wasn't defending a husband. She was defending authority. And authority, once challenged publicly, doesn't bend. But Richard still believed he had leverage. So he escalated again. This time, subtle. Caleb's school called Logan into the office. A concerned administrator explained that an anonymous complaint had been filed. Allegations that Logan's recent media attention created instability in the home environment. A welfare concern. Logan listened. Didn't react. He asked for documentation. He requested the filing source. They refused. Policy. He left calmly. But in the parking lot, he closed his eyes for a long moment. They weren't just attacking him. They were circling his son. And that's when the war changed. Because Logan Hayes could endure insult. He could endure financial strain. But he would not endure threats to his child. That night, he sat across from Eleanor in her penthouse apartment. Not his place. Not neutral. Her world. He placed the school notice on the table. They're escalating. Her face drained of color. They filed against Caleb? Yes. Her voice dropped. That's beyond business. Logan nodded slowly. They're trying to make me reactive. And you're not. No. She leaned back, studying him. You're terrifyingly calm. He gave a faint, humorless smile. When you grow up with nothing, he said, you learn how to lose without breaking. She walked toward the window overlooking the city. They think you're weak, she said softly. They think wrong. The next morning, Logan made a call. Not to a lawyer. Not to police. To someone older. Retired. A man named Frank Delaney. former corporate compliance officer, now running a quiet consulting firm. Logan had met him years ago when Frank's truck broke down near the garage. They talked while Logan repaired it. Frank liked him, respected him. Logan explained everything. Frank listened carefully, then asked one question. Do you want revenge or resolution? Resolution, Logan answered immediately. Good, Frank said. Because revenge is loud. Resolution is surgical. Within 48 hours, Frank's firm began quietly investigating. Vendor pressure, board interference, subtle stock movements, anonymous complaint filings. Richard had power. But power leaves fingerprints. And Frank knew where to look. Meanwhile, something unexpected happened. Public sentiment shifted. Not because of a PR campaign, but because of authenticity. A video surfaced online. Not from Logan. From someone at the garage. A customer had filmed him helping an elderly woman whose car battery died in freezing weather. He refused payment. Said, just drive safe. The video spread. Not viral, but steady. Comments changed tone. Doesn't look like a gold digger. He seems real. He works harder than half the executives criticizing him. Eleanor watched the shift quietly. Logan didn't. He didn't care about image. He cared about Caleb. He cared about integrity. And integrity doesn't trend. It persists. Then Frank called. I found something, he said. Richard had been leveraging subsidiary contracts to pressure independent vendors tied indirectly to Logan's life. Not illegal on its face, but unethical. And one line stood out. A recorded conversation. Richard instructing a regional director. Apply pressure where it hurts. He'll fold. Frank had obtained the recording legally. Corporate compliance oversight. Richard had grown careless. Arrogant. Certain of victory. Logan sat back in his chair. Is it enough? He asked. It's enough, Frank replied. For what? To end this clean. Eleanor stood in the same boardroom a week later. But this time, she wasn't alone. Frank was present. As independent compliance counsel. Richard looked irritated, then confident, then uneasy. Frank played the recording. The room went silent. Not shocked. Disappointed. There's a difference. One board member removed his glasses slowly. Richard, he said carefully, did you instruct vendor interference for personal leverage? Richard tried to deflect. Tried to contextualize. Tried to rationalize. But power had shifted. Because Eleanor hadn't reacted emotionally. She had waited. Documented. Proved. The vote happened quickly. Temporary suspension. Full review. Access restricted. Richard's empire inside the empire. Crack. He looked at Eleanor across the table. You're choosing him over blood? She met his gaze. I'm choosing integrity over insecurity. He stood abruptly. This isn't over. She didn't respond. Because she didn't need to. That evening, Logan stood in his garage as the sun set. His truck repaired. Caleb, laughing in the waiting area. Mike walked over. Heard something big went down in corporate land, Mike said. Logan wiped his hands. Maybe. You good? Logan looked at his son. Then at the engines around him. Then at his own grease-stained palms. Yeah, he said. I'm good. Because for the first time, they weren't defending themselves. They were in control. But Richard had said something important. This isn't over. And men like him don't disappear quietly. They retreat, regroup, and strike where pride hurts most. The man they tried to break becomes the standard. Richard didn't disappear. Men like him never do. They retreat behind lawyers, behind influence, behind carefully worded statements. But suspension from the board was only the beginning. The full compliance investigation uncovered more than vendor pressure. There were stock shifts, quiet reallocations, attempts to consolidate voting power before Eleanor's birthday deadline. The strategy had been clear. Force instability. Invalidate the marriage. Regain control. But the timeline collapsed. Because Logan didn't fold. And Eleanor didn't panic. And power, when confronted calmly, exposes itself. 3 weeks later, the board held a formal vote. Richard entered the room composed. Confident. Still certain he could talk his way out of it. He began with charm. Shifted to defensiveness. Then indignation. It was strategic protection, he insisted. Family interests require hard decisions. One board member spoke quietly. Not criminal ones. Another added, and not personal vendettas. The final vote was unanimous. Permanent removal from executive control. restricted access to family holdings, public statements citing ethical misalignment. Richard stared across the table at Eleanor. You'll regret this. She held his gaze. No, she said calmly. You will. For the first time in his life, he wasn't untouchable. And he wasn't defeated by wealth. He was defeated by patience. But the real ending didn't happen in a boardroom. It happened in a school auditorium. 2 weeks later, Caleb stood on a small wooden stage during career day. The teacher had invited parents to speak about their professions. Logan almost declined. Public attention still lingered. But Caleb insisted. Come talk about engines, Dad. So Logan stood in front of 32nd graders. No suit. No PR team. Just his worn jacket and steady voice. He explained how engines work. How small parts matter. How one loose bolt can cause failure. And what happens if you ignore the warning signs? A kid asked. Logan smiled slightly. Eventually, he said, something breaks. The room was quiet. Not because he was famous. Because he was real. Afterward, a few parents approached him. Not to gossip. To shake his hand. One father said quietly, I saw what they tried to do. You handled it right. Logan nodded. I handled it the only way I know. That night, Caleb hugged him tight. You didn't take their money, Caleb said. Nope. Why? Logan crouched down to eye level. Because if someone offers you money to walk away from who you are, it means you're worth more than the money. Caleb thought about that. Then smiled. Good. Back in the city, something unexpected happened. Eleanor called Logan into her office. But not for strategy. For opportunity. I want to propose something, she said. He raised an eyebrow. Another contract? She almost laughed. No. She slid a folder across the desk. Inside was a proposal. Investment capital. Not for him personally. For the garage. Modernization. Equipment upgrades. Expanded diagnostics. Ownership equity offered to Logan and the current staff. He looked up slowly. You're buying my workplace? No, she said gently. I'm investing in a business that deserves to grow. He closed the folder. On one condition. She tilted her head. You don't own it. Pause. Then. She smiled. Agreed. It wasn't charity. It wasn't rescue. It was respect. Months passed. Her 35th birthday arrived quietly. No dramatic countdown. No clause activation. The trust remained intact. The shares stayed with her. And for the first time in decades, the price board operated without fear tactics. Richard faded into irrelevance. Not bankrupt. Not destroyed. Just removed. And sometimes removal is the strongest justice of all. One evening, Logan and Eleanor sat on the hood of his truck watching the city lights. No reporters. No headlines. Just stillness. You know, Logan said thoughtfully, this started as paperwork. Yes, she replied. And now? She looked at him carefully. And now I don't know where the contract ends. He didn't answer right away. Because somewhere between boardrooms and break lines, between humiliation and resilience, something real had grown. Not built on leverage. Built on loyalty. You once asked me what I bring to this marriage, he said quietly. She looked at him. Yes. I bring grounding. She nodded. And you bring fire, he added. A soft smile touched her face. And together, she asked. He glanced at the skyline. Together we don't bend. Silence settled comfortably between them. No audience. No pressure. No performance. Just two people who refused to shrink. The world had watched a mechanic marry a billionaire and assumed imbalance. They assumed weakness. They assumed motive. What they didn't understand was this. Status doesn't define strength. Money doesn't define value. And humility, when paired with courage, becomes unbreakable. The woman who rejected Logan at that restaurant? She saw grease. Eleanor saw grit. Richard saw opportunity. Logan saw dignity. And dignity won. Because in the end, the man they tried to buy, the man they tried to scare, the man they tried to belittle, didn't become powerful. He proved he already was. And that is a kind of wealth no inheritance can touch.